Welcome back, Red Spotters, to another show here on the Red Spotlight Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host today, Alexis J. Soto, and I'm joined by, here's Peter himself, Peter Martinez. How are you doing?
Hello.
Things doing okay with you?
Sure.
It's always reassuring to catch up on how you're doing. The weather has changed here lately, and it's kind of unnerving. I don't know.
We live in a desert, so
Yeah.
It's either like boiling hot or fucking cold. And the air sucks. Like, not just like environmental wise as well.
Happy thoughts here
Happy
on
thoughts.
on the show. Thank you all for tuning in today. We have a wonderful show. This is a much teased show that we've been talking about for, I think, the better part of 2 weeks now. And this will actually be dropped on the final day of October. It is going to be billed as our Halloween special. I think the first time we had a Halloween special was last year when we talked about the classic Halloween film from '77 and the John Carpenter Halloween film, for those who are not aware, and then also the newer 2018 Halloween film, which is a lot of fun talking about those films. And with following up in tradition, we have a new horror film, a new classic horror film that we'll be talking about today, which also coincidentally also happens to have a sequel coming out in theaters fairly soon.
Yes. We would have done the same thing we did last time with Halloween, where we review both, but some idiot over at, what is it, Warner Brothers, thought they released their best horror film not in October, which, because why? Your sequel to The Shining you're not releasing in October? Okay.
And to add on top of that, I mean, talking about a year of Stephen King, you could have had October be filled with both It Chapter 2, which also was not an October release, you know?
Yeah. We got no good horror films in the theaters. Not that I can think of.
I mean, It Chapter 2 wasn't particularly good, but, you know, it wasn't terrible.
But it would have felt better to watch
Right.
it in October. Like, what is there to watch in the theaters right now?
Joker. That's why
Halloween-wise?
Joker's been doing so well, you know? Joker's about to hit $800 million worldwide.
It's not what I consider horror.
No, it's not at all.
The discourse over Joker is what I would consider horror.
Yeah. All of which to say is that today we're talking about the classic horror film The Shining, the Stanley Kubrick adaptation that was originally based on Stephen King's classic novel The Shining. What's going to be interesting, as how was the case last year, where I had only just recently seen the Halloween film, the classic Halloween film, as is the case this year, where I only just recently saw The Shining for the very first time. And I had a lot of thoughts about the film that we're going to be getting into today. And mainly what this episode is about is to give our takes on the film, examining it piece by piece. I'm talking about the crazy legacy that this film has had, and how the irreconcilable differences between King's version and Kubrick's version. I am familiar, though, with some of the key differences as to why Stephen King also did not like Kubrick's adaptation. We'll be also discussing Kubrick himself and a lot of the very particular Easter eggs many people accuse him of placing in every single shot of all of his movies, with this one being no exception. And as a bonus to this conversation, I've also gone out of my way, because I was so fascinated by it, to go see the documentary Room 237.
I told you not to.
Yeah, but it was interesting. I don't regret watching it, but it basically, for those not aware, it documents all of the batshit conspiracy theories that have come out of what they would call themselves self-described Shining obsessives. Not the least of which, also one of those was about how Kubrick helped and faked the moon landing, and how the subliminal messaging in the film was in there all along in regards to all of that.
It's more interesting to see the film as not an exploration of The Shining, but rather an exploration of certain individuals and what obsession the nature of obsession, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that's also kind of in here in the film to begin with, which is eerie enough to begin with. So
it's meta.
Absolutely. So that's going to be our show here today on Red Spotlight number 194, Redrum, Redrum, Redrum. The Shining, released in 1980, directed by one of the most acclaimed directors in the entire history of cinema, Stanley Kubrick, or Kubrick, depending on how you pronounce it, based on Stephen King's novel, The Shining, and stars Jack Nicholson, and probably the in the best perfect casting possible. Jack Nicholson stars as well as Shelley Duvall and Danny Lloyd as their characters Jack, Wendy, and Danny. And, without really kind of overstating it, and I don't think it can be, The Shining, my association with this was like, oh, it's considered to be one of like the best horror movies of all time. Well, evidently enough, based on further research, a lot of people actually refer to it as the single best horror film of all time. And we'll be talking about this film at length. So, Peter, how shall we start with this journey of The Shining?
It's trash.
Okay.
I don't know.
I guess with the general premise, although I think and people should know the general premise of the film. I think if you're listening to a podcast of The Shining, this family goes off into the Overlook Hotel, which is a very isolated hotel in the middle of nowhere, and the isolation starts to beget insanity, and then also ghosts are there, and then massacre. Allegedly, I guess you could say.
We can't. I guess we can start at this place because everyone likes to mention it because it's a funny fact. Stephen King hates the film.
Despises it, I think is a better word.
In fact, he considers it quite a betrayal to the original source material, which I can kind of see.
I understand it, actually, considering what's come to light about it. And what, in my own research and finding, is that, well, I mean, let's just look at the basic history of the production of this film. Stephen King did actually go out of his way to compose a treatment for the film adaptation. And what the end result of The Shining was, under Stanley Kubrick, was that Stanley Kubrick basically threw that away because the differences, there are some pretty drastic differences in terms of the characters, and then also in terms of some of the more fantastical elements that happen. And I think really, and based on and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems to me that the basic differences between the two of them and their versions of this story is that King is very adamant about the supernatural presence, and that's the source of all of the things happening in his version, whereas in Kubrick's version, it's much, much more ambiguous and far more psychological.
And I'd also say the character of Jack Torrance is a much more emotional character in Stephen King's novel.
Wait, have you read it?
So to speak.
Have you read the novel?
Not all the way through.
Okay. So you know some of it. Okay. I haven't actually read the novel, so I wouldn't know those firsthand differences.
But like just in the film, Jack is you're kind of at arm's length with the character, I feel.
Yeah. From the very beginning, actually.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of that is Jack Nicholson. Because he can be a bit of an abrasive guy. And when I said that he was like perfect casting for this role, I mean, if what the role is asking for someone to be exactly what we get with Jack Nicholson is that you don't really know the guy, and you're not necessarily welcomed with warm reception with him. You're always kind of second guessing this guy.
Mm-hmm. And I think the film, not the film, the book is very much different than that. I think he starts out much more warm, and then it's more of a descent from there. Whereas here, he starts out and it's like, he already seems kind of crazy.
I mean, again, that could just be Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Which, of course, could also be why he was cast in the first place. But, I mean, to kind of start off with Jack Torrance, and there's a lot to really go off on here, especially toward the end of it. But the general, as this film is, first starting, what we know of Jack Torrance, based on the stuff that we're getting with Wendy and with Danny, when Danny has those visions, and when the doctor comes in and all that happens, the revelation that because he was drunk one night, he had abused and physically assaulted him, in a sense, basically his own son. And I think that's your first red flag.
Yes. And I think something like that is, you see more of in a... It's been a while since I read it. I could be wrong. But there's more of an emotional response to that with, Jack having done that in the novel, whereas in the book, it's like, ow, I didn't mean it. Yeah, in the film. And it's much more big and big. You're not entirely sure.
Which is the very nature of the film, right? Because, not only is our lead character of Jack Torrance here leave you second guessing, but just about everything that happens in the film, to an extent, is designed to leave you second guessing. And if we can look at Jack Torrance, it's like, yes, there is the direct mention of an assault of some sort, but and depending on how you choose to view this movie, you're never entirely sure to the extent of that abuse. And there could be a lot of visual imagery shrouded in the film that could tell you what happened, basically.
Those crazies got to you, didn't they?
No, not really. I think, my take, to be completely transparent, is that I think the moment in the film where it kind of became clear what's happening is when the ghost lets Jack Torrance out of the cell or whatever he's locked out of, because who else would have unlocked that? There were some that were saying that it was Danny that did it, but it probably wasn't, and then who else was it going to be? So I think it's pretty clear that was what it was. So I wouldn't call myself a fucking crazy in that regard. But, if you want to look for those things, they're certainly there.
Yeah, this is a film you can watch from beginning to end and never know exactly what is going on. And what the purpose is behind a lot of things. Because, once the film ends and the credits roll, if this is your first time watching it, you could just sit there what? But wait... Okay, hold on. I need chalkboard. I need to write this all out. What's going on? But it's never so confusing where it just feels like it's random images being played in front of you. There is this narrative, a very real narrative that strings you along, but then there is so much other things that make you question what's real and what isn't, what is the purpose, what is the meaning. And I'll be honest, I don't know if I have any concrete and definitive interpretations of what The Shining is. It's definitely an exploration and paranoia and sort of falling into madness in such a way that's the most surface level of it, though. I think there's a lot more to it, but I don't know. That's a film. I don't know. It's one of those films where I kind of don't. I like the fact that I just don't understand it. I like that it's just sort of this tumble down the rabbit hole of madness, and I almost feel like understanding any more might ruin it for me. It's sort of a weird position to have because I usually don't have that with films, but The Shining is an exception.
And I think, and I really do agree with a lot of that, is that I feel that it's kind of by design, you know, and that is this descent into madness and some aspects of the film where you're left with, you're not left with, you are forced to sit there and just think about what it is you saw. And I definitely do believe that this was by design, in that Kubrick crafted a film that is meant to make you feel that way and meant to make you feel about it. And ultimately speaking, I think the best explanation is that that's the point of the movie. And I think you're better off with that feeling rather than actually solving any kind of answers.
And I also, because it's horror, like I think it's one of those, horror is always more effective when it's harder to understand or harder to see.
Yes.
Because, like, you know, what do humans fear more than anything? The unknowable. They fear death. They fear the dark.
The inexplicable.
Yes. So I don't know, just having like that sort of feeling where you kind of have an understanding, but not really, because when you try to put it into words, you can't. That's kind of a cool feeling for a horror film, I feel.
And it's definitely part of its charm. It's definitely part of its DNA.
Yeah. We literally talked about how they made a documentary about people literally just devoted to decoding the film.
Yeah.
So obviously it's pretty fun for a lot of people. Like the fact that that's even a thing. Yeah. Like the fact that's even a thing shows that that's probably was one of the goals of the film. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's the best place to actually start, is to just be upfront with what we walked away feeling, in terms of like, okay, so the question I'm going to ask you right now is, so what is your, as of this date of the recording, what in your head is closest to what you think happened in the movie?
I think I take a very literal look at the film. Like, obviously there's a bunch of subtext and themes to where the literal stuff may not mean much of anything, but just an excuse to tell a certain to say something else, much similar to Annihilation, where the literal story is just there to sort of keep you going so you don't completely lose yourself, but it really doesn't mean much of anything. What means more is the non-literal stuff they're trying to say. But if we're looking at like a literal interpretation, it's about, you know, kind of a fucked up dude. You know, he's trying to be a writer. It seems like he's not the most successful. He has marriage problems. He has issues with his child. He drinks. And he goes to, again, literal interpretation, this haunted, I was gonna say mansion, hotel, and they sort of feed on his darker nature and push him towards paranoia and darkness, and sort of push him to the point, like they have done to so many others in the past, to the point where he is trying to kill his wife and son, but he ends up dying, and then you see him in the photo, in the photo in like some, was it like 1942 or something, in the hotel?
No, I think it was much earlier than that. I think it was like 1912 or something.
Like way earlier.
Yeah. And
it's like he is sort of like forever a piece of the hotel now. Like it consumed him. That's like your basic literal, your most basic, most literal viewing of the film, I would say. Yeah,
I think more along, I think that's kind of like where you probably should start, and then you can kind of like, delve deeper into certain parts of it. And I think with the mystery of Jack Torrance, and one of the theories that are out there that's implied in the film itself, is that Jack Torrance is a reincarnated version of a previous life, and that photo was actually taken, and he was there the entire time, and that this Jack Torrance is a reincarnated version of the original caretaker of this Overlook Hotel.
He's not even reincarnated. It's more of like he's always been a ghost at that place, and he's sort of like destined. He's basically being tortured by the hotel to relive that shit over and over.
Yeah. And it's like there are some things in the film that kind of suggest that could be a possibility, where he is asked by the manager, how do you like it here? And he was like, I like it a lot. And then there are some points where he was like, there was a point where one of his first nights he was there with his family, that there was just something about the hotel that made him feel at home. So there are some subtleties there that can kind of hint. And then there's also, I forget the name, but he's warned about an incident that happened with this guy Grady that chopped up his family and killed himself. And then toward the end of the film, where he goes into the bar and then he comes across a butler that is by the same name as that guy that chopped up his family. There's a suggestion in there that Jack Torrance wasn't alone in these spirits, quote unquote, that, let's say, die, but then end up being they end up back where they started off in the Overlook Hotel.
I love that line where he's like, "You're the," because he asks him, "You're the caretaker." He's like, "No, you're the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker." And it's like,
no, but that scene in particular is especially creepy. The
film's really good at being unnerving.
Yes,
and just feeling just this overall just feeling of something not being right and being unsettling.
I can watch it with the sound off and get the exact same feeling of just being unnerved by what's going on. And I think a big part of that is, probably one of the best, production designs of any film ever is this hotel and how it's constructed. It's not just about the isolation, but there's always this impending suspension, if you will, of something being wrong. And from what I've read about the filming of this, that every now and then Kubrick would personally move certain furniture or remove certain items out of place to intentionally throw you off. And to maybe suggest something supernatural going on. Like for when you're seeing in the beginning of the film, when Jack Torrance goes into the manager's office, and there's a lot of documentation about this, that office is just impossible, because it's like Jack Torrance is walking in to a particular corner. Right behind that corner is a hallway, but he goes into it, and then there's this office with a window, a bright and shining window that shouldn't be there, because behind that wall there should be like a hallway or something. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to go into the film that suggests that it just throws you off.
So interesting. And little things like that can just, because even though most people definitely would not notice that, your brain will, and you'll subconsciously just feel like, okay, something isn't right.
Yeah.
And then add into that, the music, the creepy atmosphere created by the actors and the setting, like it all comes together very nicely to
it even
be
opens
very
that
unsettling.
way, though, because, and I think where we start off with this creation of suspense, certainly without question one of the best cinematic scores of all time, and it opens that way as we're watching. It's this helicopter shot, and it's following Jack Torrance go up to the mountain, to the Overlook Hotel. But then you hear the score, and It's like, what is this supposed to be like? Some kind of a spirit following him or something? Like
boom, 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 boom. I like because much like the rest of the film, it's just unsettling. Like it's not like in your face spooky. It's into that. It's it's like the angel of death following him to his doom.
Basically, yeah, I feel that way certainly, and I think maybe like to go back on that scene that we were talking about with Grady and with Torrance, when he says that when his family was trying to go against him, and he was like, I corrected them. So a lot of it is the acting, a lot of it is the score, and a lot of it is the design of the place. And I think you're right. Like the most remarkable thing about the film in a way is how it manages to really just unnerve you. And then by the time it gets to the third act and when everything's kind of like coming to its like conclusion, there is certainly imagery that can be disturbing.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah. An elevator gets its period.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the things that, and I don't know if this is something that is an official part of it or not, but like they do make mention of this hotel literally being built on a battleground, and it is a burial.
Another Indian burial ground.
Right. It's an Indian, or we should say,
when will they stop doing that?
We should say Native American, I guess is the PC way of saying it. Native American burial ground. And there is a lot of imagery in the film, like when they're in the pantry. There's a lot of Native American imagery. In the hotel there as well. And I think one of the literal interpretations of that elevator with the blood coming out is like some people believe that that's like the representation of the spilt blood of Native Americans, of which the site is built on. Yeah.
There's a lot of Native American imagery throughout the film.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, is it just because to stay consistent with saying it's built on a Native American burial ground? But like, no, Kubrick was that kind of director where it's like everything in the frame has purpose. And if there's certain things reoccurring, there's probably a reason why. Like very early on in the film, they say that skiing, there's no skiing at the resort, and then there's like a poster with the skier in the back at one point, and it's like, whoa, what's going on?
There's a literal frame where the manager and the Torrance family are walking across the street. There's a car coming toward them, and in the next shot, it just disappears completely. And in any normal film, that could be chalked up to like, oh, it's an error of some sort.
Kubrick would not make that level of an error.
No.
He's the kind of director who would like literally just a shot of someone standing up, walking over and closing the door. He will have you do it 100 times, and he will do it all day until he felt like it was done correctly. And he might not even tell you how to do it. He would just go like again. And like, that's the kind of director he was.
That's true. I was actually watching a video today that there were like he terrorized one in particular, but several people were beyond just aggravated by the number of takes. Like there were easily over 100 shots of the same take that he would keep asking and do. I think Scatman Crothers was one of those people that were particularly like, apparently I guess, I don't know if it's urban legend, but apparently Scatman Crothers was at the point of tears as to how often Kubrick would ask him to do it over and over and over again. So I think it's fair to say that all of these things, that Kubrick himself was an obsessive, you know?
Yes.
And so it's not, I think, unreasonable to say that there could be multiple hidden meanings in the film that he could just put in there himself. But I think ultimately if you want, I think he does lay a groundwork with that Indian burial ground site that, okay, well, and with the imagery sprinkled throughout all the film that, well, yeah, that makes sense, right? That the supernatural presence is because of the Native American Indian burial ground. I mean, that's kind of I guess now it's considered a horror cliche. I don't know if it was one back in 70, 80.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I know in the 80s, there's just so many, like Pet Sematary, Poltergeist. There's probably more to name. But yeah, that was kind of a cliche, like a Native American burial ground.
And I guess it's there if you want that to be your explanation, but it may not entirely be the case either, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's also, shoot. Again, it was a long time ago and I barely read any of it. I don't remember if like the original story connects in any way to anything else or is definitive. I think it might have been definitive as far as it just where the spirits came from and stuff like that. Because with Stephen King, like his shit is weird. Like with it's like the clown was from some weird pocket dimension that our universe was vomited up by some giant floating fucking turtle. Pet Sematary, I think it was like a Wendigo spirit, which is a Native American. Yeah, I'm not sure. But again, I like not knowing. I think it's much more interesting and it leaves a room for the imagination, and when your imagination gets running, that's more an opportunity to get scared, I feel.
Well, it's like if we're looking at what the film ultimately is saying, right? I think there's also more than enough, if you want, to take the contrarian point of view, in that maybe really because a lot of this is psychological. And some people might, walk away with the feeling that whether or not there is a supernatural like presence at the hotel, the main horror in the film is what's not seen and what may be implied, and there's an implication of maybe there's an ongoing abuse issue with Jack Torrance and his son, and that really, the isolation did drive him mad in that sense. I think that's definitely there as well.
This could be another layer to the fact that shit's real. The ghosts seem to be manifestations of prior residents to the hotel. Like, the two come play with us, Danny.
Yeah.
The two
little girls.
The sex freaks in the bear costume.
Ooh, yeah, that.
And which, oh my god, Stephen King, Stanley Kubrick, ahead of their time, and warning us about the nightmares, warning us about the nightmare of the furry.
Oh god.
I'm kidding. Furries are cool. Well, I'm just saying, like, they get dunked on a lot on the internet, but you're cool, furries. Mm-hmm. No hating here. Yeah, and then also, of course, I don't think we even touched on this. The fact that Danny is basically, he has what they call the Shining, which is this weird, I don't know if it's
telepathic
defined. Yeah, but it's also it gives you capabilities to reach ghosts as well. I don't know. It's just in this world there are some people that seem to have this sort of weird capabilities called the Shining, and that seems to be real as well. Like, it's not. It's not like a metaphor for anything or like that. Like he just literally has that capability.
No, that's actually one of the things that's like the one, if you want to consider fantastical, but it's not really, element that's just treated as is, you know? Like he just happens to be the, and it's, I think, backed up by the other character played by Scatman Crothers, who also is a Shining, I guess you could say.
And well, you saw the documentary. I'm trying to remember of all the different interpretations I've heard. I don't think I've ever heard an interpretation where Jack's shining ability like stood for anything. I think it's always just like Danny's shining ability stood for anything. It's literally just like, yeah, he can fucking do it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think a lot of the theories out there, a lot of the conspiracy theories delve more into,
which is weird because the film's called The Shining.
Yeah, that's the thing, you know? Like the theories and what I've read are far more concerned about what it was that Stanley Kubrick was actually trying to say, more so than whether or not Danny had this ability to shine, which I think you really can't dispute that because the film treats it as very directly, you know? It's like,
it's one of the few like paranormal things within the film that's just sort of treated as factual and as bluntly as actually taking place, whereas everything else is kind of up in the air.
Yeah, and considering that his visions come true, well, I mean, it seems to put that to rest, right? Like,
we have to talk about recent film that is recreating certain scenes from The Shining.
Ready Player One?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the thing about that. Because I mentioned previously that I never saw Shining until like this past month. And Peter was
you saw Ready Player One first.
Yeah, and Peter was like, well, if you saw Ready Player One, then you should see The Shining. Problem with that is, I forgot that movie. And this is coming from the guy that likes Steven Spielberg. That movie made no impact on me, and I've forgotten all of it. So
I actively hate the film.
Yeah,
like, it stands for everything I hate in fandom. It's like really this like ownership type deal where the more trivia you know, the better the fan you are, and the more deserving you are. It's fucking weird. I never liked it.
Yeah, me neither.
It's a real gatekeeping, and fuck that. And this, yeah, I mean, this isn't a review of Rogue One. Not Rogue One. Ready Player One.
Ready Player One, but you wanted to mention about how that scene.
Oh, well, first of all, it's the most entertaining part of Ready Player One. Like when they entered, when they were walking into the movie theater, and you could hear the music, dun dun dun, dun. Like that was the first time I like perked up. I'm like, oh my god, this is cool. Like, but it's so funny. Just watch if you were to see the two side by side, because in Ready Player One they turn it into like this, like there's zombies everywhere and like there's like slashing shit. Like it they definitely turn it into something that The Shining isn't. And it's funny seeing it side by side. I don't think it's a bad thing. Obviously you got to change it for the Ready Player One film, but it definitely demonstrates that all these years later, it is extremely culturally impactful. And then also the interesting history that Steven Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick had with each other.
Absolutely. I was actually having a conversation with Kyle pretty recently, and he had told me that Kubrick was essentially the one that handed Spielberg the AI screenplay or something like that.
Oh, you don't know all the stuff that's with that?
Well, it's
AI?
like the Kubrick. Well, I haven't seen AI, so I don't really know much about the film either. So it's like, but when I know that that's one of Steven's movies, but I didn't really know too much more than that. And
Ooh,
go ahead and talk
okay.
about it.
There's so much interesting history with that. I it was one of they were real big fans of each other, and they sort of developed the film together. And Kubrick, I think, has always been accused of not exactly having like a warmth to him and his films, and I think that's something that he always admired with Steven Spielberg's films. And so it was AI was sort of Stanley Kubrick trying to do a Steven Spielberg film, and they developed it together, and it was like this sort of not modern, but like futuristic retelling of Pinocchio in a sense. But of course he died before the film could be made. So then Steven Spielberg took over and he made it. But it then became sort of Steven Spielberg trying to do a Kubrick film.
Basically.
So it's a really interesting, like, you should see some videos on behind the scenes for that. I think you would find it endlessly fascinating. And even though the film was pretty mixed during its release, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember really loving it. I thought it was like a really well made film, and just the history behind it makes it all the more interesting. Yeah, that's a good
If I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken for Minority Report, but wasn't AI? Some people were like saying that it was a commentary on the oh my god, what was it? After 9/11, Bush, the Patriot Act, and what
AI?
Was it AI, or it could have been? There was a film in Spielberg's 2000s era run that had a commentary of George W. Bush's Patriot Act following the events of 9/11, where like civil liberties are like trampled on and everything. And I'm not sure.
I don't think it's AI. It's not a. Oh God, I'm trying to think. Maybe it was Minority Report.
It could have been that one, which is on with Tom Cruise.
Oh, with Tom Cruise.
Isn't that AI?
No.
That's not Tom
no.
Cruise. Okay. No.
That AI is Haley Joel Osment. Minority Report is Tom Cruise.
Okay, then it was Minority Report, not AI.
Okay,
yeah.
Wait. Did you say Tom Hanks?
I said Tom Cruise.
Okay.
Tom Cruise.
I don't know if I heard wrong. I don't know. I've been getting a lot of things wrong. It was probably me. But for some reason I heard Tom Hanks. But yeah, no, Tom Cruise. So have you ever seen Minority Report?
No, not either yet.
Okay. So in it's like a future in which there's these like telepathic individuals,
right,
that they have in this weird thing that they're able through their telepathic abilities to tell when a crime is able to have it happen before it happens.
Right, yeah.
So they arrest them before they ever even commit a crime.
Right.
And then it's sort of like, well, if they just, the morality of it all. And then I guess at some point they like telepathically send messages through there's some computer, and then they read them and they see the crime and who commits it, so then they go arrest it. And then Tom Cruise, who is one of the crime police or whatever, one of the things comes through and the arrest is for him, that he's supposed to murder someone. So then he goes on the run, and then it's this whole conspiracy. Yeah, that's also a really good movie as well.
Yeah, both of them have, from what I understand, are
Spielberg was still pretty great during the 2000s, I gotta say.
Right. They're definitely no Ready Player One.
No, God.
Which I'd argue he didn't really care about either to begin with. But yeah, I know both of them by association of the documentary Spielberg, and they were showing scenes of those movies in the film, and one of those scenes was very much what you just described. So that's why I was kind of getting it confused, because AI and Minority Report were like so close to each other,
Yeah, they both came out pretty close, and they're both futuristic films.
Yeah.
But AI was the one with Kubrick. Kubrick is The Shining.
What's interesting is that, it's not hilarious, but it's an interesting dichotomy, if you will, because the whole thing with Steven Spielberg is, yes, his films are warm and his films are cherished and beloved by mainstream audiences. And of course, as we mentioned in our recent episodes with Scorsese and the Marvel back and forth and everything, we always talk about Pauline Kael and how she originally took Spielberg's films and the warning that she issued in her accusations that his films were great for the masses but were not a serious form of art. And it's interesting how Stanley Kubrick, who, not all of his films are beloved by critics, but a lot of them have been hailed as some of the best forms of cinema. Shining included.
He's the serious filmmaker.
Right. Shining included, but mainly the one that Kubrick is most known for is 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is considered to be one of the classics of all time. And so what was interesting about that dichotomy is that Kubrick, his films, because of how they're made and because of who he is as a filmmaker, they were never designed or meant to really be cherished in the way of, to be left with warm regards of that such, or basically how Spielberg films were, And so what Kubrick, and Kyle said the same to me, is he wanted to make something that was more Spielberg-esque.
Yeah. I think it's funny because I think it's more of, that's just kind of not the person he was. I think for both of them, right?
Yeah.
And both of them admired the other's works, but neither of them were each other, at their core.
No.
Which I find so interesting, and to bring it all together, funnily enough, I would argue that Spielberg's take of The Shining is Poltergeist.
Yeah. Because he did write Poltergeist too.
Tobe Hooper directed it, but I think it's rumored that Spielberg did a lot of.
I think he wrote the screenplay.
Was heavily involved.
I believe he wrote the screenplay for Poltergeist, and then somebody else directed it.
Pretty sure.
From what
Tobe Hooper.
Right.
Do you know who Tobe Hooper is?
No.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, that's lovely. So yeah,
but no, it's very Spielbergian, and that's also another one where it's it's a house. The family gets terrorized. They're on top of an Indian burial ground or Native American burial ground.
Exactly.
It's I don't know.
I mean, from what I understand, it seems as if Poltergeist was what Stephen King wanted Shining to be. Because if we look at the differences, ultimately I feel that why Stephen King was turned off was because Kubrick intentionally went out of his way to not be a direct copy of King's work. And I guess from King's perspective, that's understandable. But as you and I think it's no secret that you and I have been pretty consistent in terms of it's called an adaptation for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And then also, I also feel like King, he's older now. He's had so much of his shit adapted.
Yeah.
I think he's at the point where he's adapt. Yeah, good job.
Well, it's
you know what I mean?
Yeah, but obviously back in 1980 it was a different story. But don't forget, he actually went out of his way to, I think he directed or he produced a 4.5-hour miniseries of The Shining for ABC television network.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think the story definitely, it was one of his most close stories to him, I think, emotionally.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that people took away from The Shining is how Jack Torrance, who is in there, who is a struggling writer and who is having issues connecting with his family, just in general, how Kubrick pretty much made him the villain essentially in this story. And since Stephen King kind of had, from what I read, similar conditions when he was writing The Shining
problems.
That could have really been a personal, I understand why he probably took that the wrong way.
I think it was a very personal story.
Yeah.
and then to take it in just a completely different
But it's
direction.
also the insinuation that perhaps, like, you could make a suggestion that a little bit of Jack Torrance is Stephen King, and that Kubrick was kind of like mocking that, or like just like making that the embodiment of evil in this movie, you know, like that could also play into it.
Well, I think, like I said, Jack is just very cold and unnerving and distant from the beginning. And I think the character was meant to be a far, far, far more relatable individual.
Yeah, in the novel.
And that individual mostly who related to was himself. So yeah, I can understand why it is that he felt that way. But like I'd say, I think he's softened over the years, is because the new film Dr. Sleep that's coming out, like he signed off on it simultaneously. No, not simultaneously. He signed off on it connecting to the Kubrick film. Like he was cool with it.
That's kind of a minor miracle in and of itself, because as the film Dr. Sleep is being basically promoted, it is a sequel to both Stephen King's version as well as Stanley Kubrick's version.
Mm-hmm. And then also just being its own story, because Dr. Sleep was its own book in of itself. So that's I gotta say, I am very excited for that. I really like Mike Flanagan. I think he's a great director. He's done some wonderful horror. If you guys have not seen the Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, please watch it. The ending isn't great, but everything leading up to it is fantastic. And even Steven Spielberg tweeted about it. He's like, it's absolutely fantastic. Oh, and then he also has another Stephen King adaptation on Netflix, Gerald's Game, which is also really well done.
I guess as far as the film is concerned with The Shining, obviously the performances are all terrific. There's just, and I guess we can also take this time to mention how Kubrick kind of tortured Shelley Duvall.
Oh, do you want to get into that?
We should, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and there's footage of it too.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's like, whoa. Yeah.
and it's like, poor Shelley Duvall. Like you could see like she's just falling apart, and she's sort of like shrieking back at him, and
like he's going out of his way to be mean to her, basically.
Yeah. And this is my stance, okay?
Yeah.
I love film. A lot.
No shit.
A lot. Film is my life. It's great. I love it so much. At the same time, in the grand scheme of things, film ain't shit.
Yeah.
Especially in comparison to human beings. At least in my eyes. No film, I think, is worth the pain of another human being. At least unless they give consent, because there are actors who are like, yeah, throw me against the wall, and to do an action scene, I'm totally cool with it. Like, let's go. If there's consent, awesome. But Shelley Duvall clearly was just tortured against her will, because
she was made to seem, I think she was intentionally made to feel bad, and from what people suspect is that Kubrick did that with the intention of getting a better performance out of her, which, if you divorce it, the performance is stellar from Shelley Duvall, especially when it comes to the horror parts of it. That's not the same thing as saying that it was okay for him to do that. I don't think in today's standards that wouldn't fly anymore. That's just the reality.
This is my thing. In today's standards, I have seen some of the most breathtaking performances, and those people weren't tortured.
Exactly. And I think that's
like, I hate the argument where it's like, well, you can't argue with results. Yeah, I can.
No, I didn't mean to suggest
no,
that.
I know, but I see a lot of people like defend it by saying like, well, he got the results.
One of those people was actually Shelley Duvall herself.
Shelley Duvall is, well, okay, I was put it this way. a lot of she's okay, oh god, how do I say this? She grew up in a time in Hollywood where that shit was normal.
Okay.
And I think you see a lot of older generations, even when they are themselves the victims, say like, hey, why are you people complaining? Like, they're kind of conditioned to just think it is the way it is. Like there's maybe a lot of older women saying like, hey, if these girls, don't want to get harassed, they shouldn't dress like that. And it's like,
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I understand it. It's this generational, I think, mentality that, and considering the conditions in which she was brought up and when she made her mark on the industry, it was a different time and era in which, yes, that was acceptable. Even if you were a victim of that, it was entirely okay with. And what I mentioned is that she was one of those people that went on the record saying that, yeah, he was mean, but you know what? You can't argue with the result, and I respect him. That was her answer to it. Now, things are obviously different today, and in general, I don't think it's cool or actually rather okay to torture somebody just to get a better performance out of them. That's just not acceptable. It's not something
I look up to.
Yeah.
And go like, wow, he's an auteur. It's like, no, he's just a douche. Like, if you hire a good actor and a good actress, they will deliver a performance. You don't need to physically torture them or emotionally, because at that point it is no longer acting, and in which case, why do you have actors? And I've seen plenty of amazing actors and actresses do amazing things with simply by acting, not actually being put in those situations. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, you look back, it was just that time, and it's not good. It's not something where I think you look back and you're like, cancel The Shining, cancel Stanley Kubrick. Like, no, it was that time period, but it's also something that I don't think you should look up to, or just be like, well, it's okay, he got a good performance. Like, no, it's
never okay to torture anybody. I think that's just a general rule. And also, when we're talking about that, we should mention the checkered past of this film, right? Because when I think this falls into a category of a cult classic somehow, even though now it's much more mainstream classic, but it was kind of hated when it came out.
It's so funny. I've been seeing a lot of things, like films and reading a lot of things. And, I've kind of always defended critics, but goddamn, there's so many amazing films that were just not liked at the time of release.
We should mention, you just actually, you unearthed this old clip of Siskel and Ebert defending Star Wars, or actually The Empire Strikes Back. I saw that. I don't know if that was on the Empire of Dreams documentary, but I had seen that clip before, and there are so many films that have come out in all of these years of cinema that were really trashed by critics, and then they've come back, and they've had like a return. And I think from our perspective, as we're a new generation, we're like, well, what do you mean this was horrible?
But it's so interesting, the words they use. Like, even like Siskel and Ebert, who were defending the film, they're like, yeah, who cares if it's devoid of any of that stuff? It's fun. It's well done. And it's like, well, no, I actually think Empire is not devoid of those things. But like, even the people at the time that defended it, and then the way they're like, it's just all special effects.
I'm not even sure Siskel and Ebert even liked Shining when it came out.
Ooh, I don't like. Roger Ebert had some terrible, what I would consider terrible film opinions, and I think they're pretty well documented. There's so many good films that he did not like in initial release,
but there's a lot of them that he did love.
Yeah, but that's the thing though. I feel like film, it's like shit. That's something that it changes with time. Like you got to give it time. I like films, and you can say it was bad back then, but it's really bad right now. Where within like maybe the first day before the film's even released, the entire nature and value of a film is just decided.
Yeah.
And then that's the way it's supposed to be for all of end time. And you can't challenge it or anything like that. Because at least with these other films, like Shine, Star Wars, and so many others, you didn't have the internet. So people were just kind of allowed to have their opinions, and then they would naturally sway. But now everyone's on the internet, so it's like mob mentality, opinion is decided, and then everyone just kind of goes with it, and it stays there.
It was interesting. I told you this before we recorded that there was a particular Star Wars podcast with some infamous people who we completely disagree with. They were having a discussion on Star Wars. Go figure. And they were saying how in this decade, according to them, the entire evaluation of the Star Wars prequels has changed.
I would agree. By regular people, though. I think reviewers would still say it's crap.
But what wasn't mentioned in those comments was the possibility, at least in their eyes, they failed to mention that maybe in 10 years, Last Jedi can completely end up being beloved. That was never a possibility in their eyes, from what I understood.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, God. I 100% believe it can be. I'm sorry, but if you can find love and meaning out of Attack of the Clones and The Phantom Menace, it's not going to be that hard to do the same. Like, I'm already there with The Last Jedi. Once again, it's generational. And also, I think films need time. Films grow on you. Films change. I know that happens for me.
Perspectives changes for us. I think it should be noted. Mm-hmm. I hadn't told this to you yet, but I actually went back and listened to our old audio commentary, our first audio commentary of Star Wars The Force Awakens. Mm-hmm. And it's fair to say when I speak for you and I that some of our takes are cringe.
Let me tell you something. I don't even remember what we recorded like 2 months ago. I guarantee you it's cringe.
Yeah.
No, like, oh God. Oh, this shit's on the
like
internet.
One thing I'll tell you is that you were adamant that Rey had to be somebody tied to the lineage.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I admitted that like literally in the review, like the next day when we reviewed The Last Jedi. I was like, you know what? I was super, super adamant that Rey had to be a Skywalker. I just saw the film and I'll tell you, I've changed my mind completely. I've honest to God, I've done a literal 180 now that I'm pissed that she's that there's the possibility.
Spoilers.
That,
if there's a possibility.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said the possibility that she won't be a nobody.
Right.
I want her to be related to no one. But you know.
So it's well documented.
Our
that
opinions have changed wildly.
and so have ours. And definitely with Star Wars. I mean, don't even get me, going on that. But if we can transition now to some of the more how shall I put this? Batshit. I guess we can call this batshit, but so some of the more conspiracy theory elements that has followed The Shining that came in through room 237. So Peter, what do you think? And this is one of the ones that's actually that I find the most interesting. Mm-hmm. Is this where Wendy happens upon a man in a bear costume giving a blowjob to this other guy in one hotel room.
It's hot.
Right. But what do you think that meant in the grand scheme of things?
It meant that at one point, some people stayed at the hotel that had some crazy nights there. But if you want to connect it, it could be maybe like sexual frustrations, repression.
And I think that's what that's kind of the tree I was barking up, because one of the ones that I was reading was that particular scene is connected back to the scene where Danny is being examined by the doctor back in their home. And Danny, who is, I don't believe he's wearing any pants. It's, you don't see anything on camera, but he's laying on a bear pillow. And then that's also connected back to Jack Torrance, who, when they first arrived to the Overlook, and again, we're talking about Kubrick, who just puts things in there for a purpose. Talking about 1980, he's just reading a Playgirl magazine, which, if you know what that is, that's basically Playboy for gay men. He's reading a Playgirl magazine out.
I didn't even remember that.
No, it's there. He's reading a Playgirl magazine in the middle of the day out in the open. And when the general manager comes up to meet him, he's reading that. He just puts that off to the side.
Yeah, and I would imagine that just wouldn't be out in the open. Like, that's something that you wouldn't do out in the open. If you read something like that. And what the theory is that when you consider that with the pattern of abuse that Jack had toward his son, the insinuation there is that the abuse was actually sexual, and that Jack is a repressed homosexual, and that those feelings were being taken out on his own son. Repressed sexual feelings manifested in the worst way possible upon his son. That's, honestly, I'd never heard that one before. That's interesting.
I can send you a video clip on that. That's actually that I did find that interesting, because it also goes back to this the sequence of events that happens in the film, where we see Danny go into room 237. We have Wendy find Jack having a nightmare that he had killed both Wendy and Danny. And then Danny comes out creepily after having gone into, at least we're seen, having gone into room 237. He comes back. He's walking all like he's been hurt. And then it's revealed that he had been hurt, and that there was, I guess, some kind of a bruise or something on his neck or on his shoulder. And because there are only 3 people there, according to Wendy, she immediately suspects that it was Jack that did that to Danny. And that's when she runs off. And then when she comes back and finds Jack in the bar area, she says that Danny had told her that there was a woman in the bathtub that had tried to strangle him. And part of when you put together all this theory is that, I guess the suggestion there is that it was Jack that actually had done the abuse, and it just so happens that this woman in the bathtub was just something else. Again, it's interesting, and I guess there's some kind of there is subtext to that, and I guess there could be an insinuation there as well.
But then, what would it mean when he? Because isn't that right after where he goes and he checks out the room, and then that's the lady in the bathtub?
Yeah. Well, it's like talking about room 237. Part of a big popular conspiracy theory about the film is that Stanley Kubrick used this movie to subliminally to cast some kind of subliminal message to the world that he filmed the supposed faked moon landing. We've all heard these conspiracy theories throughout all of time recently that the moon landing was faked. And a popular conspiracy theory is that Stanley Kubrick personally, I want to emphasize, conspiracy theory was that Stanley Kubrick partook in the filming of this faked landing. And the thing that people, the big major red flag that people take on that is that room 237 is, and how it's treated in this film, as something that you can't go anywhere near, and you can't open that door and find out what's in there. You just can't. It's supposed to be the representation of what they did to fake the moon landing and how under wraps it's been. And because I do believe that when Danny goes into room 237, he is wearing that famous Apollo sweatshirt. Right? I think that's what happens. And so, and then there was this weird, this gets beyond just, any kind of reason, to where the exact position to where Danny is playing with some trucks on the floor, and with the crazy design of that carpet, apparently it was like the exact coordinates of the moon or something. And it's really just like particular.
Oh, what parts of the internet are you on now?
Well, this is in the this is the documentary.
I know.
That's the sad part about it. There was another popular conspiracy theory that Stanley Kubrick had intended the film to be watched forwards and backwards at the exact same time. And that they're supposed to, the images when you're watching it forward and backward are supposed to overlap. And there's supposed to be like a duplicitous meaning behind what images are like playing over. You see,
I'm calling bullshit now. I'm sorry.
What?
I'm calling bullshit.
I know.
Now. I'm ringing the bullshit.
That one
bell.
is pretty easy to shoot down because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe there are different cuts of the film.
Yeah, and it's like, you can do that with every fucking film.
Absolutely.
Run it forward and backwards, and you'll find shit that somewhat connects. That's what they did with the Star Wars films.
Yeah.
Like, what was it? The Ring Theory. It's like, whoa, some things are similar. It's actually genius.
There was this.
It's like, it takes a little more than that.
There was this hilarious one where there was apparently a lot of like anti-Nazi message in the movie. Because evidently enough, and this is hilarious, in the final shot on the film, in its final, its final transition to reveal Jack Torrance in that, the full frame of him in the photo, if you stop it as it's transitioning, and this is what they do in the documentary, that there is a literal Hitler mustache on Jack Torrance's forehead.
God. I think at some point you just got to step away from a film.
Yeah, you really do.
These people.
And I'm sure I'm just touching the surface. It was fun watching it, but it was so like crazy town.
Like I said, it's more interesting as a real life view of obsession out of hand.
Yeah, like that's kind of what it is more so. I mean, there are some things that if you're an obsessive and that's what you want to believe, I mean, if you want to believe something that bad, you'll rationalize anything. And I think that's kind of like what they've been doing really with that. Yeah, I guess the ones that I'm closest to buying are like this whole like Native American burial ground, and I guess the subliminal abuse or sexual abuse in there. That those are interesting.
That's interesting, and like even if that's not even if it's clearly not intended, it's still interesting. There's still something there with which you can grasp and view. But like, if you freeze the frame, there's this mustache on his forehead. There's nothing for me to like absorb with that. I'm sorry.
There really isn't.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'll just say this, that as a film, I was just so endlessly engrossed and just caught in the atmosphere of it. And as a film, I think it more than does its job at what its main point is, and that is to get you to endlessly think about this movie. And in some of these people's cases with Room 237, it did its job and then some, to get them to completely obsess over the film. I think that's what it was going for. And if that's how that's how we rank our movies here, I think it was perfect in that sense, really, and how it ended. And I think that, legitimately speaking, I do think that last shot of the film is like one of the scarier ones. I know that when we were finished doing a podcast, The Shining was playing behind me. You told me to turn around, and I think I jumped out of my seat because I was like, oh shit. Like, that's a legitimately creepy and scary, just like final frame. And it does get you to question the entire, like, it does get you to question what it is you even just saw in this, you know?
And it just leaves you with this sort of eerie emptiness. Like, but just real quickly, we got to mention, like, culturally, there's so much iconic imagery. And when it comes to this film, the twin girls come play with this. The carpet.
Yes.
The what's his name? The son in his little tricycle riding through the hallways, room 237. Jack with the, what's it called? The axe.
Oh yeah, and here's Johnny.
Here's Johnny, going through the maze in the snow. Jack just like staring creepily as his wife and son play outside. Like, it's endless. It's one of those classic films that had a massive impact culturally. And I really do feel it's one of those films where you're so inundated with its imagery and its lines and its music throughout your entire life that you can like not see the film and look back and like, I saw that film. Like, I had to have. Like, there's so much I know about the film. Yeah. But then you realize, like, no, you didn't see it. It's one of those films. And what I think is so great is that usually those films are like Star Wars. They're the big fun films. Even the horror films, they're the big fun films that are like that. But this is a film that's just there's maybe one jump scare. I don't even think I would consider it a jump scare. It's just this eerie, dark, tense descent into madness. And it has a narrative, but it's not entirely clear. Again, it's a film that's meant to be pulled back layer by layer. And the fact that this is one of those films that's one of our, cultural icons, I think that's pretty cool. I like that.
No, I agree with you. And I think I'm pretty comfortable in saying this is like my favorite horror film. I've been getting more and more into horror. But what I've really discovered is that the kind of horror that I like, I like psychological horrors, but I also do like a supernatural horror too. I think supernatural can be quite haunting. I mean, literally.
Have you seen The Exorcist yet?
Yes, I have. Oh, okay. Yes, I have. I was actually thinking about doing a show on that, but since it's already the end of October, we'll just save it for next year. But I actually, because I did see it also this month as well, I believe, or last month. Yeah.
Because I think. Well, I guess. Well, you can say real quick. I had a feeling you'd probably really like that one.
I did. Not as much as Shining, because I think there's just more to really.
There's more to pull apart with this film.
Yeah, but I generally enjoyed Exorcist as well. So it's like it's interesting because Shining is kind of like the best of both worlds, where you do have the supernatural horror, but then also the psychological horror is there as well. And I do think what's on display is one of, if not the best horror film of all time in that regard. And so, and I think it succeeds in being endlessly haunting and unnerving, and in some instances disturbing. and I don't know if this is going to go too much in delving into what Dr. Sleep is, but it is curious. And I did find this curious as well when I saw The Shining is, yes, as we touched on it briefly before that, Danny and also Scatman Crothers, who have these abilities, in a way it is central to what's happening in the movie, but in a way it's also just kind of not. You know? And I want to ask you, it's like, how did you like reconcile that? Like, what do you think that was about? 'Cause it's called The Shining, and like you think that's what it's going to be about, but it's really not. It plays into what the movie is trying to do, but it's never something like. And I guess Dr. Sleep delves into what the relationship of these supernatural beings had with those who do shine, but it was something that was fascinating to me, how that never really was central to this movie.
Yeah. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but it feels almost like you could remove that element.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and again, maybe I need to see more readings on the film. Because again, this is a film that it's one of those, it's really rare in that like I don't care to delve into it myself.
Yeah.
I just enjoy listening to everyone's, because I don't know why it is. It's just a joy to listen to others. And like I feel like there has to be some central meaning, because I feel like a lot of the film is the connection between Jack, not just his family, but specifically his son.
Yeah.
And how, the fact that he has some sort of, because he's a Shining, he has this sort of knowledge into what is affecting his father. I don't know. I feel like there's something there. But there's
also a lingering question, and it's interesting because it could also go one of two ways. But do you think that Jack Torrance's descent into madness was something that was just naturally going to happen because of the isolation? Or do you think that there was a supernatural involvement that drove or kind of manipulated it to get at that point?
God, I think it's more interesting when you view it as the horror just sort of being a manifestation of the demons that were already with him.
Right.
And that it's like you can say that, oh, they just sort of made him do it, like these real ghosts. But I think I wouldn't go there. I would probably say that they're more representative of where he was already going. And like, I don't think you can divorce the two. I don't think you can ask the question, like, would everything have been okay?
No.
If there were no ghosts? So. It's like, I think they're entwined.
Right.
I think they're kind of one. Yeah. That's kind of the way I view it.
Okay, so going back to the beginning, how I asked this question is, because there are people who think that when Jack Torrance is released from the cellar, some people think it was Danny. I mean, at least to me, it was clear that it was, what's his name? I forget the guy's name, but the butler, the ghost butler that did it. And I think that in many critics point to that moment as the point in the film where like you're meant to, so these supernatural things are actually there. What do you think?
He could have opened it some other way. And he just sort of imagined the ghosts. You know what I mean? I'd find it more telling that, his son is able to see things, or his wife. You know what I mean? Rather than that it opened. It could be that he imagined some ghost being able to open it, when in reality it was him doing it the whole time, and maybe there was some latch and he did it. I wouldn't put as much weight on that scene as others, but others probably know and understand a lot more than me. So take that with the biggest grain of salt ever.
Yeah. No, but I think really what you have here is a masterpiece of work here. It's generally a film that has stayed with me. And I think what's, for me, and I've said this for years now, the films that spark the most interesting conversations are the ones that stay with you, but also the ones that are designed in a way to not just be completely absorbed in one sitting, So many films you see where like everything that you need to know is just kind of like spoon-fed to you, or it's spelled out. And because of that, they just become aggressively mundane and uninteresting. But it's films like these to where they're just so internally psychological, and I think it has...
Well, I would say, the goal of a film is to be entertaining, and you're
right.
A good way to be entertained is to constantly be engaged with the film, and when you're constantly pulling apart the film and engaging it, and when it different points of views and different aspects, like that's it. It just makes the film way more entertaining, rather than, you got a film where it's like, well, this is specifically what's happening. Then it's like, okay, well, then I no longer have to engage with that part of the film, because now I no have to engage with this because that's resolved, But if it's more ambiguous, it's more open-ended, there's more layers to the film, I'm constantly with the film and interacting with it and making it an overall better experience. And I wish more mainstream films would do that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in mainstream films, it is like we need to explain everything. But then again, it's hard to blame the people that make these films, because they literally don't explain one thing, and then there's 5-hour YouTube videos about how the film sucks because they did not explain every single tiny little thing, and that therefore bad film.
It says as much as how movies are made as to what audiences really want,
Yeah.
And that's kind of just in the age that we're living with now. And because we did this with Hook too, because I talked with Hook about with
that's
Kyle,
another one. Bad reviews.
Another one of those films. And you have to wonder, it's like what I had said about Spielberg's Hook film is that in a lot of ways that film embodies what a lot of people want, a lot of audiences want today, and what they didn't necessarily want back in the early 90s when it was released. And you always have to wonder if that film in particular was way before its time. And with what I generally enjoyed Hook, I didn't care for it the first time I saw it years ago, but watching it again, it wasn't bad. I liked it, and I think a lot of what it did with the film was what I ultimately wished a lot of these Disney live action remakes would do, is to, I don't know, just do some kind of a different take or twist with it, take some chances, have some vision, and it doesn't.
I will say, even though there's a ton of influence from the Disney Peter Pan animated film, I've never looked at Hook and thought, oh, that's the live action Peter Pan film. I've looked at Hook and gone, oh, that's Hook. Yeah. And you can't say
it's its own thing,
Yeah.
It's its own entity. And you can't divorce the other live action, I guess, quote unquote remakes from their original animated counterparts. And that's kind of the point here. And with this movie, you also have to wonder how this film would be received if it were actually released today. But then again, it's kind of the impossible question because it wouldn't be made the same way or released today. That's kind of like the big, folly of asking that question. But yeah, and without question, as you said, one of the most influential films in terms of pop culture, because obviously we've all seen these references just sprinkled throughout other films or other works of art. And one of them, and I find often to be the case, that many of these pop culture references to these films that I hadn't seen until recently have come from fucking Family Guy. And that fucking trend continues to be the case.
Because that's all Family Guy is.
Yeah, that's...
90% of the show is, it's like, look at us reference pop culture. You think that's bad? How about when John Stamos ate chili peppers? And then cuts to John Stamos eating chili peppers. That's Family Guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been that much of a fan of Family Guy.
Yeah.
I know you were a pretty big fan.
Oh yeah, I was back in its time. Cause like that was my Simpsons basically, because I didn't see Simpsons at all.
Simpsons was Simpsons.
Right. Which you can now watch on Disney Plus. So, that's oh God, I don't want to end off this way, but I feel like I have to say something because I find it to be disturbing. Recently, in the last podcast, I went on this like massive rant against Bob Iger because he had released some comments that wanted to insinuate as if that company cares about film. It is distressing to me. With this buyout of Fox, there are continuously new and inventive, hellish ways to show how that buyout was a fucking disaster. And one of which is that even Fathom Events can't show a Fox film anymore because Disney now owns it. And it's not as if Disney is doing anything with those movies.
No.
They're just going to be, they're putting them in the fucking vault, and that's that.
They want any time you pay for them, they go directly to them. And it's like Disney, I'm sorry, Disney was the worst company in the world to take these films.
I agree.
Easily the worst. I would much rather Apple or any other company, because Apple still would have allowed them to Fathom Events.
Yeah, because why would you?
You still would have got physical releases and stuff like that. Disney is going to stop. Is going to destroy physical media.
No, physical media is another part of that as well, because we had already been suspecting that, that was Disney was going to stop the wholesale release of physical media. And even more so with these old Fox movies, they're never going to see the light of day ever again, it seems, in terms of getting a reprint or a reissue. And it sucks because, one of the things that we had thought of is, well, all of this, treacherous library of Fox titles were at least going to go on Hulu, right? No, they're not. They're not going to go anywhere. And I'm sorry, I find that incredibly depressing, because I think a lot of these old Fox films deserve to be seen on the big screen again. I would gladly pay to go see Alien and Aliens on the big screen, Like,
so many films can be lost to time if we rely solely on streaming services and digital. And at the end of the day, you'll never truly own that piece of art.
Yeah, you won't.
It can be taken away from you at any second.
It can.
But with physical media, that's yours.
Mm-hmm.
That piece of history is yours. So,
and it's also
go buy the 4K release of The Shining.
That's the one that I bought, the Best Buy Steelbook.
Yes.
But we should also mention that the incredible amount of damage that Disney continuously inflicts on the exhibitors. It's not just enough that they have to throw their weight around whenever a Star Wars or a Marvel comes along and demands that they have to show their movie in the best screen for at least 4 weeks or they don't get it. Mm-hmm. But even with films like these, this is small potatoes really to like these these smaller theaters. And
a lot
even
of them
then,
thrive on it, though.
They,
Like there are these
yeah.
old-fashioned theaters that thrive
Mhm.
on just selling, like come see classic films, every weekend.
And what Disney just did could just basically wipe them out of existence.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That was one of the things where it's like, well, if all movie theaters are literally just going to become, your theme park Disney machines, just another extension of Disneyland, at the very least, like, I'd like to live somewhere where there's, a semblance of at least a small theater here and there that shows these classic films and smaller films and, the Netflix films. But they might not exist. So I don't know.
All of which is to say, guys, is
we left you with the real horror.
Go watch films and go watch these classic movies. Give them a chance, and maybe you'll find them enjoyable. This is technically speaking the second in a series of podcasts where we look back at particular films. And look back at their legacy. The first episode was with Kyle and talking about Steven Spielberg's Hook, and this is obviously Kubrick's Shining, and there'll be others that will be taking a deep dive, if you will, into. But at the end of the day, I love this film, and I think it's going to be one that we'll be talking about forever and ever and ever. Thank you all for listening for this to this episode. I want you to remind you can stay here under the spotlight and listen to more podcasts every single Sunday, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And until next time, bye-bye.